Today, I'm inviting you to come with me on a little tour of the perfect steak taco. All right, we're gonna do steak tacos, so obviously we gotta talk about the steak. I'm gonna be using some skirt steak here, but we're gonna talk about that a little bit more a little bit later after we've made the marinade here. So marinades in Mexico tend to be fairly minimal, very light. They could be just a salt on it and let it sit for a little while. It could be salt with a little bit of lime juice. Sometimes people will put some garlic in with that lime juice. And if you're gonna go sort of full bore, then you're gonna add some other spices and herbs to it. That would be oregano, a little cumin, and black pepper. And then what I've seen people doing a lot recently is take the Nor Suiza, which is like chicken bouillon, that's just packed with all kinds of things like MSG, and put that on it. So I'm going to take you through the full bore marinade here, but we're going to go a different direction when we get to the Nor Suiza stuff. Okay, let's start with the lime juice here. I'm going to do about 3 tablespoons of lime juice using the Mexican lime juicer here. So I got 1.5 tablespoons with half of a lime there. So that will be two halves, I think, will bring us up to exactly where we want to be here. And then I'm going to add to that the garlic that we talked about. I would normally, if I was doing large batch, put it into a blender and just blend the garlic into it. But for this point right here, I'm going to suggest that you use a microplane grater. It's way faster than trying to do a very, very fine mince on the garlic. So you can just push it through like that. When you get to the end of it, though, don't go fast because you could grate your fingertips off into this. So right at the very end, I just sort of go slowly with it. And then we'll put that grated garlic, which is quite fine here, into the marinade. And that will be, I guess I'm going to use this small bowl here. So I'm just going to tap the microplane there, scoop it up in the knife, and then put it in there along with the 3 tablespoons there of the garlic. Now, I'm using whole spices. You may have ground black pepper, ground cumin, but I'm going to grind them fresh because their aroma is so much more vibrant. So if you're gonna make the best steak taco that you've ever had, you're probably gonna want to start with everything fresh here. So crush that all up till you get an absolute fine powder. Okay, I think I've got what I need here. I will usually keep next to the molcajete a small brush so I can put those spices, or get all of those spices out of the mortar very easily there. And then I'm going to put into it half a teaspoon of salt. And the last thing that I have to go, well, I got 2 things to go here. One is that I'm going to replace the notion of something that's really jam-packed with umami, like the Nor Suiza, with Worcestershire sauce, what they call salsa inglesa, English sauce, in Spanish in Mexico. And I'm just going to dump in a couple. I have it already measured out into this because the salsa inglesa that I have here, the Worcestershire, the Lee and Parents, the good stuff, is in a gallon jug, and so it's a little hard to measure out of, so I tend to dump it into something else. And then I'm going to eyeball a couple of tablespoons of olive oil here. You can use vegetable oil for this. Either one would be fine for this preparation. Mix that all together, and you've got your marinade made. Now, that brings us to talking about the skirt steak for these really good skirt steak tacos. What you need to know first is that there are two kinds of skirt steak. There's an inside skirt steak and an outside skirt steak. Usually you would think that an inside piece would be more protected and more tender, but that's not the case with skirt steak. It's the outer skirt steak that is the really, really tender and beautiful and most beefy tasting of the two. So you need to ask the butcher what the butcher has in terms of skirt steak so you'll know how to work with it. Outside skirt steak, you don't have to do anything to. Inside skirt steak, it's thicker, and most of the Mexican butchers that use it will butterfly it because it's considerably thicker than this piece here, which is the outside skirt steak. They will butterfly it, and then they'll run it through a tenderizing machine, a jacquarding machine. That's sort of that machine that's got all the little needle-like things that come down and actually tenderize the meat, because that inside skirt steak is really tough. Okay, so if you get it, and you don't have it tenderized or anything, you might want to pound it a little bit just to tenderize it yourself before you use it. And it's going to cook take a lot longer to cook than using the outside skirt steak. Even I got confused on that. Okay, so this is what I would call more of a topical marinade than a marinade that is going to tenderize the meat. So we'll put it on here and leave it sit for an hour. Now, if you leave it sit for longer than an hour, it's going to take the red out of the meat. And that's why I season this highly as a topical marinade here. And then with a pair of tongs, I can just turn the whole thing over and make sure that there is plenty of this marinade all over it. Flip that guy there. And also I've got the last little bit of the marinade I can sprinkle over the top of this one here and this one here. But they're nicely covered now. Salt will begin to cure the meat a little bit. Acid will give it a bright flavor, all those herbs and the spices that go into this. I think you'll just love, and the brightness of that fresh squeezed lime juice is unbeatable. So I'll meet you at the grill in an hour. So this is what it's going to look like. You can see that the red at the top of these pieces of meat has darkened some. But if I see a little flap here where it wasn't completely covered with the marinade, it's still bright red. That's what I want it to look like, because I think that everybody wants the steak to be really beautifully pink on the inside and not to have that all sucked out by the marinade. An hour is what we did here. I've got the fire here at about what I would call a medium-high kind of a fire, not medium. It's got to be hotter than that because I want to get some real grill marks, some sear on this thing. I know we put some oil in this marinade, but just to make sure that everything is nicely coated in oil right when I put it in, I'm spraying that. I love that sprayer there. And then lay it down over this medium-high fire, like that. I'm not trying to get all that marinade on there. You can mostly just kind of like brush it off. I'm going to use the sprayer again to oil the top so that when I flip it over. So this is going to take, and this is all dependent on your fire and how thick your pieces of meat are, but someplace around 3 to 4 minutes aside. Now, I am a firm believer in medium rare steak, but not medium rare skirt steak. I like skirt steak to be cooked a little bit more because it's more tender. So a kind of medium is what I'm looking for skirt steak. And because it's such a thin piece of meat, you kind of have to go with your intuition on this. It's not going to necessarily take the touch test that I have shown you many times. It's not going to take that test very well because the piece is so thin here. Now, as with all grilling, you want to leave the piece of meat alone in the place that you set it down until you get that really good grill marks underneath. Then you can start to pry it away. Hopefully it will come away really easily, and especially if you have well-seasoned grill grates. The little chrome grill grates are almost impossible to season. So if you have those on your grill, you might think, well, find out if you can get something like a cast iron grill grate to go in there, or even I have sometimes put cast iron grill grates on top of the little chrome ones, because you can really season cast iron grill grates well, and they hold so much heat that you will get a really nice a nice sear on them. Okay, so I'm seeing that this one, even though it had that garlic in there, which tends to stick to the grill, is quite free from the grill. I season these a lot because this is one of my primary grilling areas here. But so you can see now how that looks just gorgeous and well seared. Look at that one. So we're gonna cook that for another 3 minutes, I'm gonna guess. This piece is a little thicker than this piece, so I'll take that piece off first. And I think in about 3 minutes, this is gonna be good. I'm going to put it onto a rack so that I can let it just rest and reabsorb the juices and not lose so much of its juices onto the cutting board. When these are ready, I'm going to put them on here, and then I'll meet you back at the cutting board. Now, while that delicious smelling meat is resting, I'm going to mash some avocado here. I often talk about my sort of fantasy steak taco, and it is a little dab of guacamole, as they would call it in Mexico, but it's really just mashed seasoned avocado plus some pico de gallo on the top of it. So I have pico de gallo here. I'm not going to go into that today because I've covered that in other videos here. I'm just going to scoop out this avocado from the flesh. The flesh from the skin. And then I'm going to season it with just the two things that it really lacks. It really needs salt, and it really needs lime. There's a little dark spot in one of these, and so right up at the top here. So I'm just going to leave that in there and scoop around it like that. Use the old-fashioned potato masher to go through this 5, 6, 7 times. I want it to be coarse because I like the texture of avocado. I don't want it to go all the way to, say, like a smooth puree. Put some salt in it. Now, it might surprise you. In the recipe that accompanies this video, I'm going to tell you it's going to take a scant teaspoon of salt, and you're going to go, no, it doesn't. But if you don't season the avocado that much, it's going to drag the whole thing down. So you have to make sure that it's really well seasoned. I'm going to give it about a tablespoon of lime here. Not quite the whole half of that. I just want to perk up the flavor, but I really want this to be the essence of avocado flavor. I'm going to give it a taste and see where our seasonings are. Yeah, I think I hit it right, because this is a condiment, so it should come off just a little bit salty, like all condiments do. Now let's talk about cutting up skirt steak, because skirt steak has to be cut across the grain. So with our thicker piece here, we will start. You'll cut it into about 3-inch segments like that. And then you will cut cross grain. So turn it 90 degrees and cut across in about 1/4-inch strips. Now, if you cut it with the grain, if I don't turn it the 90 degrees like that, if I cut it with the grain, then it's going to feel very tough when you're eating it. But cutting across the grain, it'll be very nice and tender. Okay, so we've got, see how pretty that is? That's the medium that I was talking about. That's what I like. This, as the thickest part of it, it's sort of medium to medium rare. And when you get to the thinner piece, it'll be just a little bit more on the medium side. Okay, so say there's our meat. First of all, doesn't that just look delicious? Now, this is a place that you could use a finishing salt. Don't worry if you don't have a finishing salt. You could just use a little bit of salt that you would normally use in the kitchen. But if you have one of those sort of nice finishing salts that's in bigger flakes, this is a good place to use it. Let me just scrape this stuff over here into this bowl. And then I will build for you my fantasy perfect steak taco. Okay, there's that. I've got another spoon for the pico de gallo over here. I am going to lay a fresh made corn tortilla. It's got to have that. I mean, it's got to be, you got to have a good tortilla for this. And for those of you that have access to good flour tortillas or like to make them yourself, this is a dish that is always associated with northern Mexico. So yes, you could use flour tortillas for this, but I'm using corn tortillas because that's what I like. And I'm going to sprinkle a little of this. This is Malden salt that has that really beautiful flake. So I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of that over it, just like you would any kind of steak. And then I'm going to put some of these beautiful pieces of skirt steak onto the tortilla. Then a little dollop of our seasoned mashed avocado, and then a spoonful of classic, you can see I just go really classic for this, but classic pico de gallo, salsa mexicana, and that really is it. Except that now it's really it.